number 4, which is minutes of the last meeting. They have been circulating on emails and stuff to us. So that, do everyone agree they're correct record? Who read them? Thank you. Move on to planning applications now. And we will move on to the first one, which is Red Lion Street. Red Lion Street. And Nolly, will you take this for it? Thank you.
The first application is for Red Lion Street. And get to the next slide. There we go. There we go. So this proposal is for a full planning permission for change of use from a Class E retail to a restaurant, cafe / bar, Class E and sui generis. So this is the red line plan indicating the site. The site fronts 1 Red Lion Street and Westgate runs east of the site, east to west of the site. So the proposal has been revised over the course of the assessment to provide a better development. And as part of the application assessment, we received objections and a number of concerns were raised. And one of these concerns that was raised was to do with the fire strategy. So I'll just address this now. The issue with the fire strategy was raised in the objections. And as a result, the proposal was revised, and now there are 2 fire exits proposed. But it is worth noting that in terms of fire safety, it is for Norfolk Fire Service to determine whether or not the fire strategy is acceptable or not. And this is a separate legislation which does not form a material consideration in this application. Going to the site. This is view of the site looking from Rampart Horse Street, and this is the 2-story retail unit, which is proposed to be converted into a Class E /3 generous cafes, restaurant, bar. So the site is a commercial unit and it's rendered in cream on the first floor, and the ground floor features glazing with a recessed entrance. To the north, there is a small side alley entrance here, and to the south, you've got supermarket Tesco's here. In terms of the surrounding area, it's predominantly commercial with mixed retail use, and the building character is mostly historical, and most of the buildings are made red brick and limestone. So we've got an aerial image of the site. So just to give you an indication of where we are, this is M&S here. And then we've got what was the Debenhams here. Rampart Horse site is down here. We've got our site here, and then Westgate Tower is here, and the bank manager's house is here. Coming to the back of the site, we've got the Barclays car park, which is shown in the image. And this is roughly the site, the back of where the roof terrace is. And then behind that car park, you've got Westgate Tower here, shown in the image. And we've got the alleyway here to the north side, which comes out to Red Lion Street. So in terms of the praise plans here, we've got the elevation plans, and the proposed external changes are considered to be an improvement to what the building currently looks like. The design would be following traditional materials, which would complement the existing character. The proposal includes outdoor seating at the front elevation. So here we've got balcony with outdoor seating as well as here, which would be a positive contribution to the character of the area and kind of add some interest to the area. In terms of materials, the proposal is mostly red brick, black cladding and some full height glazings at the front. And the balcony would have like decorative metal fencing and glass balustrades, as well as awnings are proposed here and here. In terms of the opening hours, we're proposing to condition them 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday to Saturday, and then 8 to 10 on Sundays and bank holidays, and this is secured by a condition. Here we've got a 3D visual of what the site would look like. So this is just for illustration purposes only. This is what it would look like with the red brick, elements of cladding, and you've got the sitting area here, and then the roof terrace here. But it's not exactly as indicated in the image because there wouldn't be any structures on the roof. Here we've got the proposed ground floor. So the ground floor plans kind of gives an indication of the layout of the building, and you can see towards the front is like dining area with a bar service area, and as you come to the back, that would be where the kitchen facilities are. And here at the back, there is a small yard at the back of the property. And within this yard, there would be a bin store for all of the waste. And the proposal is for bins to be collected twice a week. And that would be between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. And the bins would be brought out for collection on the day of collection in the morning. So the indication here provides that potentially the first floor would have a potential capacity for 40 people. And going to the next floor, we've got the first floor, which is also just mostly dining, restaurant service area with a lobby for staff to kind of monitor people going in and out and making sure people are seated at their tables. This is the roof plan. So the proposed has a roof terrace, which is kind of indicated in the plans here. On the roof terrace, there would be areas of seating, as well as a small service area, which would be like a coffee bar for beverages and things like that. And then you've got plantings going all the way around the borders of the terrace with the glass balustrade. And you've got the metal work balcony as well going to the front. In terms of the roof terrace capacity, this would be for 100 people. And here within is a little void at the side of the property where it adjoins with the Tesco. And within this space, that's where the plant equipment would go. So roughly here. And also just to mention, there would be various forms of external lighting proposed to be added on the roof terrace to make sure there's adequate lighting. So this would be wall lights, strip lights, and light posts. It's a section drawing of the internal of the restaurant. And here we've got another like bird's eye view, but also kind of showing a bit more detail on the plant equipment. So here in purple, we've got what would be the extract flue, which would come out onto the side where you've got the Tesco, which is this building here. And the flue extraction system would not be visible when you were on Red Lion Street, so you wouldn't be able to see this because it's obstructed by some of the buildings at the front and is quite further back. And so here in this plan, you can also see in terms of where the fire exits are, you've got one using the main front door as well as using the alleyway, but this is subject to further assessment by Norfolk Fire Service. During the assessment, there were a number of objections, and one of the issues that was being brought up was to do with overlooking. And based on our assessment, we kind of considered that in terms of Westgate Tower, the harm by overlooking is not considered to be significant, and the residents would not be massively impacted. So Westgate Tower has commercial use at the ground floor here. So when you are actually standing at the roof terrace, this is quite higher up from where the roof terrace is. So you wouldn't really be able to have any direct views into the living accommodation here for Westgate Tower. And also if you consider there is a car park between the tower and the roof terrace, so there is some separation between that, which also works to reduce the impact. I say another issue that we had to address was the concern from noise, in particular with the use of the roof terrace. So with this application, we had a noise assessment submitted to assess what would be the potential impact on any nearby residential properties, in particular Westgate Tower here, and then bank manager's house here. And the results of that assessment was that the level of noise that would be experienced at the nearest sensitive receptors would be acceptable, subject to conditions which we have proposed. So noise sources from the property would be from people on the roof terrace, and also there's proposal for some background music to be playing. And in the noise assessment, they considered both people noise, music noise, as well as the noise from the plant equipment. So here we've got some of the diagrams that were submitted in the noise report, kind of illustrating the results of the assessments. This one is for the kitchen extraction equipment. So we've got here, that's roughly kind of like the void where the kitchen extraction would be, and based on the noise assessment, the noise that would be predicted at Westgate Tower would be 35 decibels, and this was kind of based on the data of the plant equipment to be installed, as well as having the equipment operating at the highest setting. And with that, the result was that the noise from the plant equipment would still be below some of the typical background noise that you'd get in the area based on a busy weekend period assessment. And we are quite confident that based on the results of these assessments, that the noise level would be acceptable, given that this is kind of a city centre context, which is already subject to some noise. So this is not necessarily going to significantly change what the residents in the area are currently experiencing. A similar diagram kind of showing people noise from the roof terrace when it's at full capacity. So in the noise assessment, the assessment was done with anticipating 110 people using the roof terrace, that says the full capacity, but the proposal is actually would be a maximum of 100, but it's likely that there's not always going to be 100 people at the roof terrace, because likely weekdays it will be a bit quieter, there'll be less people there, but the noise assessment is based on a worst case scenario at full capacity. And in terms of people noise, the impact on Westgate Tower is predicted that it would be 47 decibels, which is not significantly different from the noise levels which were recorded when they were measuring the background noise levels. So people noise from the roof terrace would not be significantly harmful, and it wouldn't be a significant increase in the amount of noise that is currently experienced. So we do acknowledge that it would be potentially audible, but it's not going to be too loud that it would be considered a nuisance and unreasonable. And also the assessment also assessed the noise from music. So there would be background speakers, background music is proposed, and there would be an amplified sound system, which is proposed. In the report, we have recommended 4 conditions for the details of the speakers and the sound system to be provided for us to assess this further. And in the noise assessment which was submitted, it's indicated that during the day, the noise from music would also be reasonable, and the background music noise on the roof terrace would not necessarily cause harm for any of the residents in close proximity to the site. And what we've proposed within the condition is for a noise limiting device to be installed as part of the sound system. And what that allows us to do is for the noise at the property to be controlled using the limiting system, which means that noise level would not be able to exceed a certain level. And I also got a similar sort of assessment showing the noise assessment for the evening time. Naturally, in the evenings, it's a little bit quieter, and from 9 p.m. onwards, as shops are closing down, it's a bit quieter. But even with what we are proposing with the use of the roof terrace being completely shut off by 11 p.m., meaning that at that point it would have been cleared up. There wouldn't be any customers on the roof terrace. The level of noise in the evening time would also still be acceptable overall, like the noise from the music, persons on the roof terrace, as well as the plant equipment would be in compliance with the British standards guidance for noise. And given that as well, that it's a city centre, it is reasonable to expect that there would be some background noise. But as we have kind of seen from the data in the report, the level of the noise is not going to be a level that is a nuisance and unacceptable. With the recommendations that we have proposed, the noise levels would be acceptable, and the impact is not considered to be significant. Thank you.
Thanks for that. We have got a couple of speakers. First, Dr. John Williams. It's going to be you first. Is that Nick? Yeah, Nick Blankhouse. And you just speaking for yourself or anyone else?
I'm speaking for myself, and I'm speaking for 6 other residents.
Okay, I'll give you 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. And what I've done is I will finish within 15 minutes. I've batched. Sorry.
No, not that.
There we are. Okay. I'll try and keep to the microphone. The first comments I've got to make are on behalf of the wards who live in Westlegate Tower. I live in Westlegate Tower as well. They're pleased that the empty building is going to be used because it looks awful at the moment. So they're pleased, and they've got no objections for the internal proposals for 1 Red Lion Street. But very much object to the roof terrace. There are concerns that the roof terrace is still under consideration by what they would say is the council, because nearly 2 years ago it was rejected outright by the licensing committee, and the situation of Westlegate Tower and 1 Red Lion Street hasn't changed, and the proposal back 2 years ago to licensing was for having around about 100 people on the roof terrace. So they're very disappointed that this has come up and is being recommended by the planners. Even though it's not in scope, they're also worried about possible fire safety based on the latest proposals from the applicant, which indicate that people will be climbing over ladders from the roof and ending up in the locked Barclays car park. So we understand that's still to be looked at. Small point, there's some urban art mural on the top of the building overlooking 1 Red Lion Street, and they're concerned that that will be removed or it will be defaced by the development, but that's a fairly minor point. And their final question is that this planning application has been going for nearly 2 years with multiple changes, and we've been given 5 days notice, 3 minutes to speak on an issue which is going to have a major impact on our lives. So that's the wards. The bulk of what I want to say is now on behalf of myself, the Closes, the Davises, the Wignalls and the Hoseasons, all who live in Westlegate Tower. Again, they're restating that, and I'm restating that we're pleased that the building is going to be repurposed and it's not going to be left redundant, but we object to the roof terrace. And what I'm going to spend the next few minutes on is outlining our concerns about the noise impact for patrons on the roof. As your colleague has suggested, estimates and calculations have been made about the background noise that we experience in Westlegate Tower. And what I should say is the end of the roof terrace is round about 22 metres away from the eastern aspect of Westlegate Tower. The pictures you saw of Westlegate Tower, those windows were mainly bedrooms. So virtually all the bedrooms are overlooking the roof terrace. So coming back to the impact assessment, calculations were done on the background noise, and they were modelled to say how that noise level would decay once it reached various aspects of the tower. The intention was then to say what would be the patron noise and how much louder or not louder would the patron noise be against the background noise. The patron noise of 100 people 20 yards away from us has been assumed to be 64 decibels. Now, I'm not going to get too technical about decibels. There's no British standard for this. That 64 decibels is based on a German model, 30 years old, looking at sports events. So it's 30 years old, different country, different social values, and it's different properties. So we're concerned about 64 decibels being the base level that the impact is saying is going to be the maximum noise from 100 people. There's other information around which would say a busy restaurant, a bar can reach 80 decibels. So we are looking at possibly a significant understatement based on a 30-year-old model from a different country, that there's a major understatement on the patron noise. So if we then say, okay, 64 decibels is right, the noise impact assessment has come out to say that in the evening, the noise of 100 patrons 20 yards away from our property will only be 2 decibels greater than the background noise that we experience. Now, the background noise in Westlegate, Red Lion Street, Theatre Street has dropped dramatically in the last few months. Electric buses, electric taxis, shops closing. So what the noise assessment is actually saying in layman's terms, that outside we are currently experiencing background noise equivalent to, let's say, the terrace of the Queen of Iceni being plonked 20 yards, 25 yards away from our windows. So that's what the noise assessment is, and it's based on a complete understatement of patron noise. Your colleague also mentioned that there'd be a time limit on this. My neighbour, Dr. Williams, will talk a little bit more about the impact on individual people's lives. But your colleague mentioned, yes, it'll all be finished by 11 o'clock. Well, it won't be finished by 11 o'clock because people will be clearing bottles away, clearing tables away. So it'll go on later on in the evening. So we feel the noise impact assessment is not a realistic experience of what we experience at Westallgate Tower. And we've right at the beginning of this process, we said, come to our residents, look out over the roof terrace, measure the noise that we're getting, and then take a view of whether that is going to be louder. The background noise is going to be louder than 100 people drinking, eating, talking, having to talk above the noise of 54 decibels of music. So they're going to be shouting, etc., through to 11 o'clock at night. So despite our objections to this, if you approve it, what you are actually going to consign us to, subject to licensing, is rather the situation of, say, transporting the courtyard of the Bell Hotel to 20 yards away from our bedrooms. We think this is totally unacceptable. We think it's totally going to ruin our residential amenity. And we feel that this part of the process, the roof terrace, you should not approve for the same reasons as the licensing committee said 2 years ago for effectively the same application. So I haven't really got any more to say here. And I'd just like to leave with you the thought that if wherever you live at the moment, if somebody then said, we're going to open up a hospitality building, and we're going to put a large pub equivalent of a pub garden courtyard, which can feature 100 people, and that was going to be 25 yards away from your bedrooms. So I rest my case on that, and I really hope that you do have a look at that noise impact assessment, because we feel that it's been manipulated in such a way to demonstrate that the patron noise will not be greater than the background noise, and we think that is totally and utterly wrong. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much for hearing.
Okay, no problem. Dr. John Williams, and you have 3 minutes, I'm afraid. You're just speaking for yourself. I thought we had all the residents. How many residents employed? Okay, and they are. Thank you. Okay, so I'll give you the same in 15 minutes. Thank you. Yep.
Express the views of the Westallgate Tower residents. I'd like to remind the committee that the west face of Westallgate Tower is barely 20 or so metres closest from the, but that all apartments have bedrooms on that aspect, including a teenager's bedroom on. But in summer experience, we know that windows and vents need to be open. That's a subject to noise and smell. So there are Like Mr. Backhouse, I want to make it clear we have no objection to the ground floor inside restaurant. We have a plethora of inside restaurants in the neighbourhood, and as far as we're concerned, good for us. And regarding the roof terrace, I'm a little puzzled that we're dealing with an application for a space which licensing has said no members of the public are allowed to go on. Also puzzled that the planning application is dealing with open time. And these would appear to be, to a layperson like myself, to be a priori a licensing issue. Having said that, if open times can be decided by the planning committee, I do approve of the planning officer's more recent time compared to the applicant time, which have increased from the original application, even more to the small hours. We fear that if the applicant returns to licensing, they will claim the timings have been. Grounds of our first objection is that of smells, cigarette smoking, kitchen wafting up and over to the tower. I should mention that when the My Macan restaurant, some of you might remember, which is when it was still trading, was in the lower part of the tower, but separated from the residential areas by concrete. However, kitchen smells permeated apartments, our lobby, our storage rooms. This was all through mainly concrete walls, whereas with the roof terrace, it's just roof. However, noise is our main objection. I believe the noise impact assessment is severely flawed. In the current states, we are 8 to 90 common zone. Established we are not. I think this will influence the judgment about acceptable noise levels. Also, in my view, I think it would be better produced from an independent rather than being paid for. There is mention of a noise management plan. But is the concept even realistic? If you have 100 patrons talking and drinking, how are you going to manage their volume? Individually? Do you put something out of a loudspeaker, asking them to speak more quietly or to laugh more quietly? We suggest a noise management plan is published before approval. My main concern about the noise issue, however, is that no matter how many rules or limits are applied, how can they actually be enforced? I refer the committee to the latest edition of The Citizen. The City Council blows its own trumpet, quietly so to speak, about how it's stopped some of the noise nuisance neighbours. And I say, well done to the council for their persistence. Good work. But the horrifying other aspect of the process, which became clear in the detail after, is that it took multiple warnings, installation of specialist equipment, 747 separate incidents over 18 months to enforce the law. As Councillor Beth Jones was quoted saying, excessive noise can have a devastating impact on people's lives, especially when it prevents. Incidentally, in the same edition, it writes about Norwich being age friendly. Don't think you have to be aged to have your life soured by the smells. With respect to noise, we're concerned, especially as the applicants initially planned on a DJ plus music, that there will be what I would call decibel creep. So it is for these reasons that we oppose the planning permission for the roof terrace. However, as I noted that the planning officer has recommended approval, I would ask that if approval is not put on hold, that tight restrictions are in place from the beginning, which can be gradually eased over time with consent, so that we don't suffer, as in the article, 18 months of disruption and frustration for enforcement. I thank the committee for their patience.
Great, thank you. We have the applicant here, Sepral Aslandic. Oh, thank you. And you have 6 minutes.
Possibly, I can to look at the cover letter that I presented with my application.
Very good. We can't get there.
All right. So what I'm saying is, like, in fact, I have addressed most of the objection issues in my cover letter within my plan application. And if you might have, if you can take just maybe a couple of minutes to look at it, if you can see that, that would be quite helpful. But if it isn't, then I will just try to.
I'll just go to our planning management.
No, I'm afraid we can't put individual items of correspondence up before committee. If the members wanted to have a look at them beforehand, they're available on the website. But in essence, the recommendation is based on the content of the officer report. So if there's anything that you want to draw out from the statement that you've submitted, then obviously now's the time to do it. But the committee won't be kind of looking in detail at individual items of correspondence, I'm afraid.
That's fine. In that case, I'm going to try to summarize what I just actually written in that letter. Basically, in that letter, I have to say that I have taken all the points made by the objectors very seriously, and I believe the planning officer would confirm that I have done my utmost best in order to take all the points in consideration and make as many amendments as possible and as many alterations with the plan as possible, and then basically try to reshape my initial application and also they basically evolve it or like improve it, which is going to provide a mutual satisfaction to all relevant parties, including the council and also the community, which includes the Towergate residents. I would like to mention a significant point by the first objector just raised. First of all, during the premises license application, we were here at the committee, and the premises license application, in that application, there was no authority to be able to provide, to allow people to be on the rooftop terrace because it requires a planning application first, then the premises license application would be able to consider whether there would be smoking or like drinking or whatsoever, including the use of the time of the use of the space. So the only reason that I mentioned about the rooftop terrace during the premises license application, in order to show my good intention and transparency to all relevant parties, that my initial intention is to use this place within this kind of direction and in that kind of business model, although it was irrelevant to the premises license application, because premises license application could only cover where there's legally licensed to be used. So, I hope you appreciate that. You wouldn't go and make a plan application for your roof, premises license application for your roof where there is no plan application has been granted, including the building applications. So I hope that makes sense now. And regarding the noise impact assessment, yes, there has been an issue, but as much as it has been a concern to the Towergate residents, it was a concern for me, because at the end of the day, I'm offering a harmonious, beautiful place for the community, and then I definitely wouldn't like to create any nuisance to the people who's just living by, including my own customers, my own guests. So therefore, I took it very serious, and I just ordered the noise impact assessment reports, and the engineers has came and produced that report. And the first objector has been questioning the credibility of that report, and that objection has been received by the council. So therefore, the council has gone through the report once again, and another kind of communication has been run between the engineers and the council, and the engineers, they produced an extra information regarding the British standards and also the modeling that they have taken in consideration that they base to produce this report. And this information, including the objections, including the noise impact assessment report, has been reviewed by the relevant department of the council, and council questioned, and every bit of details of the report, taking the objections into consideration, and they complete their review, and then basically it has been presented to you as a confirmation and also a suggestion to approve this application. And regarding the noise impact assessment, I would like to address another point. I looked at the Westgate Tower blocks planning application, and during their planning application, the builders or the landlords, they made 100% sure that they're providing extra measures in order to provide a healthy the city living environment for the residents who's going to move in. And in their planning application, they say they're providing glazing specification, acoustic glazing, balcony glazing, noise reduction for habitable rooms. So basically, the tower block residents, when it was, that block, when it was built, they have been taking all necessary measures in order to reduce the impact of the city noise or any noise could just possibly come from the nearby businesses, which I assume it has been complied and it has been done. But if the residents might still have any issues, they might be able to maybe look at their own building if it is such a huge problem. And the other, basically, there's another point that I need to respond. Since day one, I have been in cooperation with the council officers and all relevant departments, and every time when they just come up with a suggestion or advisory, so I took it into consideration and I made the relevant changes, alterations and everything. So basically, the plan, that this application that you see here, it's not just my personal opinion. So it has been a seriously, thoroughly worked out plan application, and it hasn't been done only by my people. It has been in cooperation with the council officers and all relevant teams. And that is the, I think, reason that the planning department is just like suggesting you to approve this application, because probably we have changed maybe 60% of the initial application in order to be able to be part of a harmonious business within the community, as I say, including the Towergate residents. And I would like to make sure, once again, I have no intention to make a nightclub or anything whatsoever. So this is going to be a place where the mature client is going to gather for good times. And then, the first applicant, again, he was saying that there will be people shouting and making lots of noise, which seems a bit kind of understandable. But on the other hand, why should I have people keep shouting at each other? That's not the kind of place that I have in mind, and that's not the kind of clientele that I have in mind as a business model. And there's another issue that I should just mention. The objector says the noise impact assessment has been manipulated, and I consider this as a mispresentation of the facts by component professionals in their own fields. And I think this is a really, really unacceptable accusation, stating that an engineering firm is manipulating the results and the council officers is just like going in line with them. So this is serious and acceptable, because I believe council officers has done their job to their best, and I just did my best to be able to just work in line with them in order to come up with a really nice and satisfactory outcome for all relevant parties. And I would just like to finish my presentation Briefly, this is just predetermined like text. I hope you appreciate that. In conclusion, this application has been carefully developed to balance the needs of the business, the community, and the local residents. It is supported by robust scientific evidence, complies with current licensing conditions, and includes extensive mitigation measures to address objections. I am committed to ongoing engagement with the community and implementing best practices to ensure this project is a positive addition to Norwich. I kindly ask the committee to approve this application, allowing me to proceed with the vision of creating a unique and beneficial space for our city. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Noreen, did you want to come back on anything what was said, David?
On me, thank you, Keith. Apologies for my voice. So I'll try and keep what I've got to say to a minimum. Just to say a couple of things about the kind of interrelationship between the licensing application and this planning application. Long story short, the two are not linked. They're two separate regulatory systems. Planning can and does assess noise impact of development, and as many of you will know, can and does attach opening hours restrictions to premises that require a change of use that may or may not coincide with licensing. So the situation as far as this premises is concerned, in terms of the license application, there's a little bit on that just for context at paragraphs 15 to 19 of the report that's actually before you, which sets out that an application for a premises license was considered by licensing subcommittee on 7th of February 2023. It's approved in part, and as has been said by some of the members of the public who've spoken, it was conditioned so that there should be no public use of the roof terrace at any time. And one of the reasons for that condition was that that application was not accompanied by a noise impact assessment. Hence, there was insufficient evidence upon which to assess the impact of the proposal in licensing terms. That said, this application for planning permission for the change of use of the rooftop terrace is accompanied by a noise impact assessment. Some of comments have obviously been made about the noise impact assessment, its appropriateness, and the conclusions that have been drawn. And we have Sally Nicholson, who's sat next to me, from Environmental Protection, who will be able to answer questions on the content and methodology for that noise impact assessment. But in terms of whether or not we can make a decision on the opening hours, yes, we can. It's entirely within the remit of this Planning Applications Committee to put conditions on that limit the use of the rooftop terrace and also the use of the wider building. So having said that, I'll kind of pass over to Sally and Naya to add any further comment on some of the things that have been mentioned, which are, just for information, are actually addressed in the report, but obviously this is the time when we can add to the detail of that content.
So obviously I looked at the noise report with regards to different aspects. With regards to the extraction system, we always require details of the noise levels from the extraction system and for the odour control. So I did ask more information regarding that, and also I've requested that we condition that to make sure that information is installed as we would want it to be to limit the noise and the odour from the extraction system. The people noise aspect is difficult. There isn't any set guidance, UK guidance, Obviously, we look at the information we're given and we review it against other noise level standards we have, and with 100 patrons, and the level is going to be 2 decibels above the background, I believe, which in the context, you need a 3 dB difference to subjectively hear that, so being 2 dB, but also the fact you are in the city centre, you know, it's, if you had the pub garden, say we have got a pub garden at Lamb, you know, there's a pub garden, there's potential residential going to be close by, it's not an unusual scenario. With regards to the noise from the music, what I'd request is that we have a condition applied that asks for another noise assessment to be done to look at what actually is going to be installed on a roof terrace. From discussions I've had with the applicant before, they were talking about having like a small speakers, having like an ambience, and obviously we want to, if that's something that's achievable, but we want to make sure that that's conditioned, so, and it's assessed and the noise limiter is installed to make sure the levels are met. So they're the conditions that I would request to try and make sure it can be achievable.
Right.
Sorry, Chair, just to confirm that those conditions are recommended as part of the approval.
I'm just going to ask Steph if we could go back to the chair, I'm afraid.
Yeah, can I say?
No, you can't say nothing else, I'm afraid, either.
No.
That's why I was going to ask you to disappear, so you didn't have to. We now move on to questions from councillors. Carly, and these are just questions, not comments.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Microphone's gone off. The first related to deliveries to the premises, and apologies if I've missed it, but I couldn't see it. Have obviously a cafe bar will require more deliveries than, you know, kind of a clothing shop. Has there been any discussion with the applicant about managing deliveries to the site? And my second question was just, I'm a little bit confused about the intended sort of operation. I don't want to stray into licensing, but it is relevant to the planning consideration in respects of noise, I think. Is it the intention that it's going to be kind of a vertical drinking establishment, or is it the intention that it's a more of a cafe restaurant with table service? I'm just not very clear about that.
So to answer the last question, from the discussions I've had with the applicants, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, my understanding is that it's going to be more of a restaurant, cafe type of establishment with drinking as an add-on, but it's mostly cafe restaurant establishment. And to answer the question on deliveries, along we haven't had any details sort of submitted to that, but in terms of how the deliveries loading bays, that would most likely be on Red Lion Street, so it would be using the same facilities as what the previous clothing shop would have been using. Let's see if I can get any.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a series of questions, and some of my stuff will go over into discussion and debate rather than questions. But one of the things that concerns me is the roof. Is the roof structurally able to support the weight of people who potentially will be using this, and the associated vibration created by movement and all this sort of stuff? And also, if a fire were to break out in the kitchen below, then it raises further questions about the safety of people on the roof and their ability to escape. Has any assessment been done? I know this possibly comes under building control rather than planning, but I think it's a serious enough concern to be addressed here.
We haven't had any reports in terms of the structural integrity of the roof terrace. I think we can't require that, can David?
No. The structural implications of the change of use are going to be addressed through the building regs, and ultimately the fire safety will also be addressed through the fire safety regulations as well. I mean, we did consult Norfolk Fire and Rescue on the arrangements in terms of where the number of accesses, because we did have concerns at one point. There was a proposal to store rubbish in the and refuse in the alleyway, and that is no longer the case. And I think we have a statement from Norfolk Fire and Rescue to the effect that they're okay with that arrangement. Although I think they have said, and Naya, correct me if I'm wrong, that the capacity of that alleyway is limited as a fire escape, but it is still usable.
Yes, so we have consulted with Norfolk Fire Service on this, and in principle, the 2 fire escapes that they've proposed using the main entrance and the side alleyway are acceptable, but there's also an implication of capacity with the side alleyway. So potentially further assessment by the Norfolk Fire Service might result in some further sort of restrictions on capacity. The capacity of the whole building has to be adequate enough for the fire strategy that's in place. So they will look into that. But in principle, the 2 fire exits are acceptable, subject to further assessment by Norfolk Fire Service.
Okay, can I just ask one? Is there any disability? Is there a lift there, or they can't use the roof?
There isn't a lift, as and according to the plans that I have, is that? Yes, please, if you can. No,
No,
no, yes, but I mean, as far as I have in the plans I have, there is only stairs. I've got a section drawing. Now, if you give me a minute, I will go and confirm with the applicant. There is no toilets on the roof, but there's toilets downstairs.
Can we just take a pause whilst Naya asks the question of the applicant, please?
Apologies about that. So the applicant has confirmed there is no lift internally. There's never been a lift in the building. There isn't a place for a lift. So it's just stairs, and then you go toilets downstairs on the ground floor.
Thank you, Chair. On on Red Lions. On Red Lion Street, it's a busy thoroughfare, and irresponsible loading puts considerable pressure on the footways. There's very often vehicles parked on the footway, I mean, basically at this venue and in that area. How could we condition responsible loading and delivery practices?
Again, that's outside the remit of planning control. The lawful use of the highway is a matter for the Highways Authority. I mean, delivery vehicles are kind of entitled to kind of temporarily obstruct both the highway and the footway in the course of making deliveries. In terms of, sorry, long story short, the site will be serviced from the highway in the same way as the existing retail uses. I think when we're kind of looking at the impact of that of the proposal, it's now important to recognise that both a restaurant use and a retail use would both fall within Class E. So there are elements of this proposal that don't require planning permission, which could result in an intensification of the servicing requirement for the premises. So essentially we can't, as a planning authority, effectively act as a traffic as a highways enforcement authority at the same time, I'm afraid.
Councillor Lovick.
Yes, thank you. In order to address some of the concerns that the objectors have, I think that the management plan is really essential in that. And although it's conditioned number 10, do we ever ask for a management plan before we give planning permission?
Naya, can I ask you to kind of tell committee what kind of things we're anticipating being in the management plan? I mean, I think but just to kind of come back to your point, attaching it as a condition kind of gives it flexibility to change, so we can, without kind of going through the need for a kind of application again, we can actually go back to the applicant and negotiate the management plan, because the plan itself can include a process for reviewing that plan at stages through the operation of the development. So that's one of the reasons why we actually attach it by condition. But yeah, Naya, if you can kind of highlight what we might expect to be in the plan.
So within the noise management plan, we would expect for it to give us some details in terms of who is responsible for managing noise at the venue, and also it would kind of detail what would we expect as the acceptable noise within levels within that venue, and times of when like the roof terrace would be closed or in use, and also we'd expect it to have some policies on noise breakout reduction, like ensuring that doors are closed as much as possible and maintaining noise at appropriate levels, so the music doesn't always have to be as loud as possible. And so details of how staff are going to be trained to ensure that they are aware of noise management approaches, and sort of staff training on how staff are going to be trained on addressing any of the noise issues. And also would expect them to implement like a complaints procedure on how any noise complaints would be dealt with, and when actions are taken, what are those actions, and ensuring that those kind of details are recorded. And yeah, that's kind of the majority of what that would be in a noise management plan.
Can I just come back and say, would it be appropriate for this committee to make some suggestions about the noise management plan? Say, for example, if it was felt that 100 people on the roof terrace late at night would be too much, and there might be an opportunity to reduce the number on the roof terrace, so to reduce the noise.
We're basically making a recommendation on the information that's been kind of provided as part of this application. So if you felt that the numbers suggested as part of this application were too high, then the purpose of the noise management plan is to manage those numbers, is to manage the noise produced by that number of patrons, not to reduce the number of patrons per se.
Okay, we'll move on now from questions. These questions, Councillor Young.
So my question was about the management plan as well. And since this is primarily going to be a cafe, restaurant and not a bar, could we impose a condition that food has to be purchased with alcohol for people to sit on the roof terrace, for example, and that alcohol can't be purchased after a certain time? Yeah, various things like that. Is that for licensing, is it?
Yeah, and can I just make a point about the having said that the licensing and the planning process are separate, which they are. As a local authority, we are obviously the licensing authority, and if there are issues with the impact of the rooftop terrace, the licensing system does give us another opportunity to manage that, and the process through the licensing system is in some ways more amenable to review than the planning process. So there is another method by which the impact of this proposal can be controlled.
Councillor Harper. Okay, thank you. Councillor Haynes. Haynes, yes.
It's a direct question sort of linked to that actually, which is that it's a long time since I've been on licensing. Is it, I think what the points when I was on licensing, we had the comments from planning sort of came through to licensing. Is that still the case? So if this was approved today, the licensing committee would hear that the planning committee had quite wanted to say reduce the number of patrons on the rooftop terrace, or the planning committee had concerns about this. And is that communicated through? I've forgotten.
No, because again, they're two separate systems. I mean, we would, as a planning department, be consulted as part of the license application, but also, but no, the views of planning applications committee would not automatically be passed through to licensing committee.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on now. The recommendation is to approve, and I'll move that. We've got a seconder. Thank you. Anyone wish to speak on the what's that? Councillor Davis first.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to speak about the noise. So what we've heard, if I understand correctly, is that this noise level has been judged on the noise you'd expect in a city centre on a weekend. But these people live here in the week as well. And also the noise levels will drop, the background noise levels will drop of an evening when the shops are shut. Therefore, the noises from the roof terrace will seem louder because the background noise will be lower. So we can't really use a comparison of these are the levels that are acceptable on a weekend in the city centre, because we're not actually talking about that. We're talking about every day, and we're talking about reduced noise levels in the evenings. So it will seem louder. I mean, 20 metres, I wouldn't want 100 people out on a roof terrace at the bottom of my garden, 20 metres away. It's the size of a kind of normal council house garden. That length, I cannot imagine 20 people, 100 people at the bottom of my garden every night till 11 p.m. And yes, Westlegate may well have been built with, you know, excellent soundproofing windows, but people have to have their windows open for ventilation. They have to have their windows open in the summer, and all of these back onto bedrooms. I don't think it's appropriate.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I actually came to this meeting thinking that the application, you know, kind of was fine, but I've changed my mind based on what we've heard, and I although I don't, I don't have a problem with there being a roof terrace. I do think that you know, what we've heard about the numbers of patrons and the way that the premises will be operated feels a bit incompatible to me. I think if this were seated table service, I would feel differently about the noise. So were committee minded to approve it, I would be arguing for conditions both to reduce the numbers of patrons and also the operating hours of that roof terrace, because I think we're asking too much of residents in very close proximity, and potentially, you know, kind of storing up problems for the future. So that's my perspective at the moment. I am concerned about the noise.
I just asked Sally to comment on the point that Councillor Davis just made about nighttime and noise levels during the week being quieter than at weekends. Thank you.
I think the noise report did look at both nighttime and daytime hours. So it did look at both aspects, is all. It did consider both of those in the background readings.
Yeah, so I would just like to echo really what Carly said. I think it's got the potential to be a really lovely venue. I think we don't have enough outside seating in the centre of Norwich. And so I'm all for having a roof terrace, but what I think is it's far too late for its location and being so close to people's bedrooms. I don't think it's fair that it stays open so late. So although I wouldn't object in principle to having a lovely quiet restaurant with a roof terrace, I think we cannot have something that's going to be open beyond even 9 o'clock, actually, because some people do like to go to bed early, and you know, it is going to be so close to people's bedrooms.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'm basically reiterating what other people have said. I'd like to thank both the applicant and the residents. I think what you could build here could be really lovely. But I live a similar distance from a pub that doesn't have outdoor seating, and it is really loud. You know, fortunately I'm a late sleeper, and so they're respectful of not doing it past 11. But you know, people do, no matter what your clientele is, I have concerns about that noise. People do get louder as they're talking over each other, you know, in these settings. They don't mean to shout. It's not because they're being rude. It just happens. You don't notice it. You know, it's like turning your radio up in the car. You don't notice the volume increasing. And I think for residents, particularly, although it's not just an age thing, but particularly for elderly residents, and particularly for young, you know, children, people who are studying, people with early jobs, I have serious concerns, but think the application could be good with just a reduction of that amount of people allowed outside on the rooftop terrace, and, you know, as Councillor Stevens said, seating, food area, maybe something like that.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, the other councillor sounds? No, I'll go. Right, okay. I question the necessity of having music outside on the roof terrace at all. That's going to add to noise. It might add to ambience, but it's going to add to noise. I know we've got a pub not too far from us, and it doesn't disturb us, but I know quite often they've got a beer garden outside, and they do have music outside, and we frequently get complaints in summer of noise, and we've had to call officers out from City Hall to address these complaints. And the closest houses there are around about good 300 metres away. So I question the necessity of having music outside. Also, we've had situations in the past where we've insisted on venues keeping doors closed other than people going in and out because of noise leakage. So that's my first concern. My second and major concern does concern safety. Some years ago, I remember a bridge at an athletics event in the Middle East somewhere, which collapsed with the weight of people passing over it. And I did some rough calculations. 100 people with, I weigh 92 kilograms, but 100 people with perhaps an average weight of about 75 kilograms is 7.5 tons. That's just the customers. Then you've got all the equipment and stuff loaded on the roof of the structures and things. And we're talking about a roof, and roofs were never designed as supporting structures. They're designed to keep the weather out from what lies below. So I really, really question the viability of a roof terrace. Much as we all like outdoor eating, outdoor dining, it doesn't strike me as very, very safe in any sense at all. Thanks very much.
I understand the way we're going. I don't think this might get me poos. So someone's got to come up with an alternative very quickly.
Sorry.
What I can say is there used to be 4 or 5 pubs just in that little bit of stretch there. And I actually drank in the Red Line the last day that was ever opened. So I can remember that being a vibrant pub.
Can I?
Yes, David?
Can I just make a couple of points about some of the things that have been said? I mean, two things have been said that kind of caught my attention. First of all, there's about the hours. At the moment, we're proposing a condition that says that the roof terrace shall not operate beyond 11. That is entirely appropriate for the committee to conclude that a different condition should be applied. Councillor Young has mentioned 9 o'clock. It's open to you to put a condition on. We shouldn't refuse consent if we think it can be managed by condition. So that's one point. Well, yeah, but all I'm saying, Chair, is that the committee members are saying, are commenting about the hours. So yeah, so it is open to committee rather than to refuse it because it's open too late. But it's put a condition on that says it must close earlier than what we're actually recommending as officers. I know, I hear that. I totally hear that. The other point is about amplified music. Again, we're proposing a condition as officers that you have something that limits the volume of that amplified music. Again, it is entirely appropriate for the committee to attach a condition so that no amplified music should be played on that roof terrace, if that is part of your concern about the impacts of this proposal. The only thing that I don't think from a planning point of view we can control is the number of people up there. Well, my advice to you, to the committee, is that we can't control the number of people because it's too difficult to monitor. One person goes up there, they're automatically over the limit. It's a very difficult condition to monitor.
Thank you. That was really helpful. So I would like to propose that we do put a limit of 9 o'clock that Councillor Young said on the use of the outdoor terrace, and with regard to sound, I think probably better to have no sound whatsoever, no music whatsoever, and on the understanding that if the management plan is good and it all works out, there is the opportunity for them to come back at a later date and increase that. But I think it would be a first step to have those two in place so that this can go ahead, because undoubtedly this building needs to be put to good use, and I think this would be a good use, but I think with those limitations.
Can I just clarify about the not conditioning the amount of people? So it says 100 people in here, but up to 110. But we can't condition that, no, at all.
I think that condition would be too difficult for us to enforce.
Yeah, okay.
Because we'd basically have to have somebody counting the number of people up there.
Thank you. I have on this specific proposal. I do think actually that licensing would be the better committee on which to condition how the space is used for a licensable activity. I think we should agree as recommended the opening times. And then we should, use licensing, which has a review process, and you can be called in again and altered and changed. And that's where we should be setting the conditions of how many people are there and how they act. And planning is, while it can do those things, is not the ideal committee to be doing those things. So we should set the 11 o'clock as proposed backstop, and then planning can reduce that further and put conditions as they see fit. Thank you, Chair.
So I think that the proposal is to add conditions to the recommendation at this point. Isn't that correct? I think that's correct. Rather than actually to approve or refuse at this point. That's my understanding, Chair.
Okay, thank you. That's been approved. So let's move on to the sustainable solution. Do you want to say anymore? Yeah, really want to say something.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, I do think it's best left to licensing, but I appreciate that point has moved. We've gone beyond that now. As a general point, I think it would be beneficial if there's been a lot of additional information provided in the meeting. This is the kind of information that I like to read at my leisure rather than try and process in a meeting. I'd be grateful if in future that could be all the information that were provided in the presentation is also provided in the report. That'd be really helpful. We get to this point of a lack of trust in whatever conditions we set, the public cannot trust that they'll be enforced because this council doesn't have enough enforcement officers in licensing, it doesn't have enough enforcement officers in planning, it doesn't have enough enforcement officers in environmental health. So therefore, understandably, the public don't have any trust in whatever we set. And so therefore they say, because it means... Agree. So I'm saying we are... Chair, with your permission, I might continue what I'm saying. Chair, are you barring me from speaking or can I continue? Thank you, Chair. Chair, will you make an apology for calling my contribution rubbish? Thank you, Chair. So my point being is that we are under pressure to put conditions on, not on the basis of the substantial issue, but rather on our ability to enforce. Public, right, okay.
Sorry, that's not what I said.
I'm not saying from you, sorry,
Okay.
officer. I'm saying from the public. The public feel that we're under pressure to do that. It is irrelevant because we've already. Thank you, Chair. So there, for all these, I think all these things are, these meetings are difficult because we always come to the crux of the issue. And whenever we come to the crux of the issue, in this case, it's the noise produced, we're always told that that will be conditioned after the meeting. And therefore, I think it's frustrating for members to feel that they don't have input on that. And that is all I have to contribute. Thank you, Chair.
I think we all agreed that the ground floor, first floor, the restaurant, perfectly acceptable anywhere along there. But I question the necessity of a rooftop terrace in this situation. So can we make a proposal that the rooftop terrace be excluded?
Well, you can, but we're already put it on one route.
Yeah, but that wasn't on whether or not we have a rooftop terrace.
Well, you put against that you did.
Yeah.
But you never know.
Well, the proposal before you is for the creation of the rooftop terrace. If you don't think it's appropriate, you refuse the application. Yeah, just for clarification, and this is my understanding, committee has resolved to add to the recommendation a condition which basically says there shall be no music played on the rooftop terrace, and that the rooftop terrace shall not be used after 9 o'clock in the evening.
Thank you. All those against, please show. Here, Councillor Perry, with your hands. Councillor Speedy. That's been approved. Thank you very much. And do anyone need a break? It's fine. Okay, we just made a slight detour because we're going to take the swimming pool first because someone's got to pick up their child who's ill. So we'll take the swimming pool first and then we'll come back to Albert Terrace. Very sorry for the people who are waiting for Albert Terrace, but it wouldn't be too long, I wouldn't have thought, hopefully. If we can move on to item 5, which is Riverside Leisure Centre, and ask our planner to go through the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for changing the order. Apologies for any inconvenience. So I'm here to present an application at Riverside Leisure Centre, which is to install solar carports within the external car park. For those that don't know, the leisure centre site is accessed off Wherry Road and sits adjacent the Riverside Walk. And here you can see the car park with a view from Wherry Road. Across the river lies several residential blocks of flats. So what you can see here, the taller block of flats in the middle there is Albion Mill, which is Grade 2 listed. The other buildings aren't listed, but they do lie within the city centre conservation area, which extends to the Riverside Walk, but doesn't extend over the subject site. Here you've got a view from the northwest on Wherry Road, which shows Bridgemaster Court, which lies adjacent to the car park, and that's a residential block of flats as well. The site lies close to Koblenz Avenue against the football ground, and there you can see the views. And this is an area of Riverside Walk adjacent Bridgemaster Court, with the area of scrubland that you see there on the other side of the hedge is part of the development site. And then you've got the view from Carrow Bridge, which lies within the conservation area. So this is the site as existing. You can see it's a uncovered hard surface car park that services the leisure centre. And the proposal is to cover the existing bays with carports that are consist of solar panels. So to do that, there will be a removal of 9 trees that are existing as part of the hard landscaping. And their replacement tree planting is shown with the green circles in the land adjacent Wherry Road. And then one against the Riverside Walk there. This is just a visualisation of the car park as existing and then proposed with the carports. The solar panels that you can see on the roof have already been approved under a recent application for prior approval. And this is just a demonstration of what the actual carports will look like. So this is a double-sided carport that will sit over the middle car parking bays. The others around the edge will just be single-sided. And I do have copies of those plans if you want to see them. So replacement planting is proposed to cover the loss of the trees, the existing trees. This is probably a better. You can see there's trees along the middle car parking bays that are proposed to be removed to facilitate the installation of the carports. I can use a cursor. Oh, brilliant. So they're across here. They've been identified as low-level trees. They aren't providing sort of any specific contribution to local amenity. And yeah, the replacement trees are proposed under the plans, but we are also proposing a condition which will condition the type of trees to be planted and also require some additional landscaping of this scrubland area here in order to improve some views. Points of objection that have been raised from the public include removal of the trees and the scale of the development. There's also concerns regarding the views from nearby residences being negatively impacted, and concerns regarding fire safety and an increase in antisocial behaviour. We have had responses from the fire service who have said that as long as it's installed with British standards, they don't have any concerns and it won't impact any firefighting strategies that would be required to fight fire at Bridgemaster Court adjacent here. And in terms of antisocial behaviour, we have had responses from the police liaison. Lights will be installed, LED lighting will be installed underneath the carports and should actually form an improvement as to the pole lighting that's in the car park at the moment, because they won't cast as many shadows. So in that respect, it should make things a bit more visible for people accessing their cars. And the landscaping, as part of the landscaping plan, will be designed in a way that shouldn't encourage antisocial behaviour or allow any additional screening for people to antisocially behave. So we are recommending approval of the scheme as the public benefits of the green energy outweigh any sort of minimal potential for harm by ways of negatively impacting views from neighbouring properties. The site isn't particularly visible from outside the immediate area, so I don't have any concerns regarding impacts on the wider conservation area or harming the character of the local area.
Okay, thank you. We've got no speakers on this as questions. Can I ask one first? Are we capturing the rainwater off the solar panels if we're putting them up? Is there anywhere that they're reusing the water or anything?
The
Or
proposal's
is
just
it
for
all straight on the
just for the carports. There isn't any proposed installation for rainwater harvesting. The existing
It's going to be
site,
gutters or something.
well, the existing site is already hard surface, so
No, that's it.
so the panels won't increase any water runoff or impact drainage. So there's not been any call for additional drainage or
I just want everybody
management of surface water runoff.
idea to get some. Councillor Harper first.
Just a quick question. Is there any reason why we can't replace the same number of trees as are being removed?
The available planting space within the site is limited, so there's just not really the space to successfully plant 9 trees in the space available to any sort of viable improvement of the site. But that is something that as part of the landscaping condition could be managed.
Thank you. Is there any
Off-site? So the as
I think our assessment is that the trees that are going to be removed are of a relatively low quality and therefore don't need replacing on a one-to-one basis. I mean, sorry, can I just come back on the guttering? There will be guttering, but it will just discharge onto the hard surface through downpipes.
Carly beat me to it, actually. But presumably the trees which are going to be planted are of better quality then, are they? They're going to be more mature trees, or what's...
So the details of the replacement planting haven't been finalised yet, and as part of the landscaping scheme, yeah, we would seek an improvement to what's there, or certainly not a negative impact.
Thank you, Chair. Popping back to the image, the image that shows what it will look like. Thank you. I was just going to ask, is it that there's no capacity for replacement trees because all the car parking spaces are sacrosanct? Because I mean, it looks like there is quite a lot of space on the site. It's just, are we is it?
Sorry, what site here?
Yes, so we've lost trees. There obviously is quite a lot of space on that site.
Oh, so here
for trees, it's just we can't lose any parking spaces. Is that, am I understanding that right?
So these spaces are part of the uncovered disabled. So 3 disabled bays will be undercover, but there are 3 disabled bays here to allow for additional vehicle height, and then the remaining spaces are available for vehicles that aren't suitable to be under the carport. It's already, it hasn't been considered to lose spaces to form replacement parking planting, because the spaces are all used.
Yes, when I read this, I just wanted to, can you confirm that when people say there's a negative visual impact on neighbouring properties, they prefer the car park with all the cars to anything else? So that's what they're saying, basically. I just couldn't find it difficult to believe. Never mind.
Yes.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, sorry, I'm finding it difficult to hear what's going on over here when there's also conversation going on over there. I've got a question. It links the trees in with the antisocial behaviour, right? So there is a big problem with antisocial behaviour along Riverside Walk. I think that is borne out by police reports from the police, from residents in nearby properties. It's borne out of what I see as a ward councillor. And one of the police recommendations here is basically we're very careful about the landscaping we use to avoid, we don't put too many trees in, essentially, to avoid antisocial behaviour. And then we want the same amount of trees to be on the site as there are now. So I'm wondering how the planners think we can both meet these requirements that the police want us to have around low-level shrubland, around keeping it properly maintained so that the site lines are maintained, and also the fact that I would not want to see any tree loss on this site.
I mean, it's a question. I guess it's a question of balance, in as it is in so many terms from planning point of view. I mean, whilst we value the points that the police liaison officer makes on applications, we're not always able to accommodate them all, because some of them do mitigate against successful planting schemes, for example. And just to kind of pick up on the point about tree planting, part of the discussion, slightly furtive discussion going on at the end of the table, is that the applicant has indicated that they can accommodate additional trees within, not necessarily within the car park area, but I think Danny showed a drawing which showed an additional tree, which was technically off-site outside the red line area, alongside the river. So the council has control over that. So yeah, additional tree planting can be secured. So we can amend the condition to reflect that.
Okay, brilliant. Councillor Davis?
And sorry, also one further point, the replacement trees will have a higher ecological value than the trees that are to be removed.
Councillor Davis?
Thank you. I think David's just answered my question. I was just going to ask if the council owned the part of land on the river and if we could plant trees there. It seems yes and yes, so that's good.
Danny, is that your pen?
Right, we move on to our last application today, 6 Albert Terrace, and I'll ask planning to take us through the report. Thank you. Go a bit quiet, please. Thank you.
So, the application here is for change of use from a residential dwelling to a holiday let at 6 Albert Terrace. So the site is a mid-terrace property on Albert Terrace, which is just off New Market Road. This is picture of what the property currently looks like. And the property has got a small front garden and a parking area, as well as a small garden at the rear. The general character of the area is predominantly residential, but there are a few other like commercial uses around the New Market area. So the proposed change of use would not include any form of physical works. The property is a 2-bed dwelling with bedrooms upstairs and kitchen, dining and bathroom facilities downstairs. And as part of the proposal, there will be no internal changes proposed to the dwelling. In terms of the site, it's accessed by a private road just off New Market Road. And during the assessment process, there was a number of objections raised, and one of these was to do with the access. This is a private road which is maintained by the residents, and objections were raised about the use of the terrace on number 6 having increased intensification on the road, which would then increase the maintenance costs for the residents. So this issue is not a planning consideration and is not to influence the decision made here today. So one other key point which was brought up in the objections was to do with parking provision. So the property only has one car parking space, and neighbours are concerned about potential guests bringing in more than one vehicle and therefore not having anywhere to park it. And to address this, we have worked with the applicant, and we've got a management plan that was submitted, and within that it provides details of how potential guests, before they make the booking, they would be made aware of what the current parking arrangements are. So they would know that there is only one car parking space at the site, and this would be reinforced via further communication post the booking. So before you book, you would know that there is one parking space, and therefore you would know you can't bring in more than one vehicle. And there is a set of other restrictions which would be associated by the book, associated with the use of the terrace as a guest house. So it's worth noting that New Market Road is easily accessible by bus. There's a bus stop immediately off the site on New Market Road, so potential guests would be able to get to Albert Terrace using the local bus services. There's a few routes which go directly to the city centre from New Market Road. So it's a fairly sustainable location which can be accessed. And in considering the use of the property as a holiday let, we're to consider potential noise and different noise sources. The property has a small garden to the back, and the garden is mostly used just to store refuse, and with the concern that potential guests would go into the garden and cause noise for the neighbouring residents. To address this, in the management plan, it provides details of the restriction which will be placed on the use of the garden. So the garden would not be available to use for recreation for any potential guests. The garden is only for accessing bin storage, and that's it. There would be no sort of like garden furniture or anything included for guests to use the garden for leisure purposes. An issue of sort of like security and overlooking was raised during the assessment. So at the rear of the property, you've got an accessway which kind of goes through the whole entire terrace, and this is a fairly open access which anyone can use. And you've got between the properties boundary fences between them. And an issue that's worth considering was to do with overlooking. So here we've got the neighbouring property next to 6 Albert Terrace, and this is sort of the view that you would have of overlooking between the two properties. So we appreciate that there is overlooking which would occur at the property, but we consider that it's unlikely that any guests who would be staying at the property are going to spend a lot of time in the kitchen. So the single story rear elements are kitchen and bathrooms. So it's very unlikely that anyone is going to be spending a lot of time in the kitchen. So although there will be some brief overlooking when they are using the kitchen, the degree of harm is not necessarily significant, and we appreciate it's a slightly unique arrangement at the back, but this is an existing situation and it's not necessarily going to be made any worse by using the property as a holiday let. And just to kind of clarify, within the assessment, we consider it to be an acceptable scheme in terms of a transport, with the site being accessible by buses, as well as providing one car parking space is sufficient for the property because it's only a 2-bedroom house. So we don't feel there is a need for additional parking spaces. And in terms of noise, and we've got restrictions which are recommended to be conditioned. And what this would include restrictions on guests coming in and out. So we propose a condition for the number of nights someone would be able to stay. So this would be limited to no less than 3 nights per booking. So any guests would be booking for 3 nights and nothing less, which would then reduce the amount of people that you have going in and out, back and forth from the site, and therefore also reducing the impact on the residents. And then also within the property in itself, the way in which it would be managed, there would be notices placed around the property reminding the guests to be considerate of the neighbours in, using music volume. There'll be restrictions which the guests would be required to follow through with. So like no music past 10 p.m. and also requiring that they're not going out to the garden unless they're going there to go to put something in the bins. And with these kind of measures, the level of noise would be sort of what you would anticipate to get in a normal residential situation where it's not significant, but there is just general living noise that you would get with the use of the property as a holiday let. And also we propose to condition for a noise management plan as one of the ways to address the issue of noise. So with a noise management plan, what has been put in place is a system whereby the neighbouring properties would be provided a named contact to whom they would be able to contact in cases where there is excessive noise complaints, and then it would be for the property manager to address those concerns, communicating that with the guests, and all of those sort of complaints that would be made and any of the actions that would be taken to address any of the complaints would all be recorded in a logbook, which would then kind of allow us to kind of ensure that the property is being managed adequately by placing that as an additional condition which the applicant would be required to comply with. And overall, the scheme in itself, the change of use, we appreciate that there's concern that was raised in terms of, so we're losing a dwelling into a holiday let, and the proposal in itself, it does satisfy the policy requirements, in particular policy DM15, which says that a loss of accommodation can be acceptable where it results in a better quality environment, accommodation being brought forward. So the site was vacant before being renovated, whilst being renovated, and the renovations which have taken place have resulted in a better quality accommodation, and also the property in itself, it can be reverted back into C3 subject to planning permission. So there wouldn't be any way that would anything that would stop the property going back into residential use. The way in which it is laid out as it is, it's still a residential property and can still revert back into a residential property without needing any physical works. So in terms of complying with policy DM15, it's considered that the proposal complies, as it would bring back a higher quality accommodation back into residential use. So overall, the recommendation is to approve, subject to the conditions that are listed in the officer report.
Okay, thank you very much. We have got some speakers on this one, and the first one is Annie Ogden. Thank you. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Just like to say that we're both speaking on behalf of all the residents, the long-term residents of Albert Terrace. That's 8 households plus objectors from 47 to 69 Newmarket Road in front.
Did they all put objections in separately?
There've been certainly 8 in Albert Terrace and at least 2 in 47 to 69. I don't need lots more time.
Okay, I'll give you more time if they
No, I'm sure you need your lunch. So one of the main aims of the Greater Norwich local plan, as far as I can see, is provision of good quality, affordable housing, which is in short supply, I think very much in the news today. Going back to policy DM15, it aims to safeguard the city's housing stock, and it says that development resulting in loss of existing housing will only be permitted in a limited number of circumstances. And one example is where there's an overriding community gain. And we'd argue that allowing this permission to go through, A, reduces the housing stock and actually would be detrimental, have a detrimental impact on Albert Terrace, which is an old-fashioned, tight-knit community. Most residents stay there for many, many years, but we also offer a warm welcome to new owners and new tenants, including in recent years 2 families newly arrived from Hong Kong. So we all know that Airbnb can erode the quality of an area and its community, its sense of community. And this has been very much in evidence in many European cities, which are now bringing in retrospective legislation to try and repair some of the harm done. Several houses in the terrace are let, including 2 further houses also owned by the applicant for this permission. I know you're only looking at this one application, but I would just stress that we are concerned that this would set a precedent, set the seed for actually this happening to other houses, and that this could be the thin end of the wedge for our community. We are concerned as well about well-being and security. We've already been hearing about noise this morning, and from the piece in The Citizen, you know how difficult it can be to police noise, even when you've got long-term residents. But when you've got people coming just for a couple of nights, 3 nights, say, away from home, a bit more less inhibited, plenty of alcohol, noise levels do actually rise, and our walls are extremely thin. And you've seen that there is a shared path across bisected gardens directly outside our back doors, including mine. I'm concerned about leaving my back door open when you've got different people coming and going. You don't know who's there from one day to the next, smoking outside and so on. And when you've got a long-term resident there, you can build a relationship with them and negotiate. If you've only got people coming and going, you don't have that. So we could have, several sets of renters coming and going every week in a very small cul-de-sac with, as you've seen, very limited access, only one way in and out, and very limited parking provision. Now, the application says that the current proposal will provide essential holiday accommodation to this area of the city, helping to boost the local economy and support surrounding facilities. But this is the middle of, a very residential area in Newmarket Road. There are very few facilities that I think would really benefit from having people renting as opposed to staying in hotels. And policy number 6 in the local plan states that tourism and related developments are an important part of the local community, but it says it's important that it doesn't itself damage the very things that people come to the city for. So that's all we really wanted to say. I think my neighbour Paul wanted to make some other points, but thank you very much for listening and for giving us the chance to speak.
Great, thank you. We have Paul Kay next. And you have 3 minutes as well, Paul. Thank you.
As Annie says, the GNLP guidance prioritises properties in Norwich as homes. I believe there are insufficient grounds to override this protection. And as we've heard, there are significant issues around the suitability of this property for short-term letting. Further, unless the council act now, there will be continued erosion of the number of homes available for residential lets in the city. Going back to the access to Albert Terrace is via a very narrow gateway from Newmarket Road, next to a well-used bus stop, as we've heard, and opposite the entrance to Town Close School. Cars entering or exiting the lane cross a bus and a cycle lane and a busy pavement. The lane, having entered the lane, is a single-track private road maintained by us, as you've heard, and there is no street lighting in the road, and there are no passing places in the road. The lane is quite regularly blocked by delivery vehicles, by taxis. Bin days are a bit of an issue. Having residents on Albert Terrace and Newmarket Terrace are used to driving with extreme caution on the lane, and a constant flow of short-term visitors unfamiliar with the road layout will add a significant risk of accident. If we have a 3-night minimum stay, 200 days a year, that's 70 people driving in the lane every year. There is no shortage of visitor accommodation in NR2. Within half a mile of Albert Terrace, there are well-established hotels, the George, the Annesley House, Georgian Townhouse, and the short-term rentals at 82 Unthank Road. Many of these businesses have made significant investments over previous years, and a proliferation of Airbnb-type properties simply competes for guests and threatens existing livelihoods. Across the UK, there has been a significant loss of properties available for rent recently. This follows the much needed regulation over domestic rentals, which has seen a trend for property investors to sell up or to move to short-term lets, chasing the higher profits that will be available. Given the well-documented negative aspects of Airbnbs, several cities have taken action to restrict the number of nights such properties can be occupied. As well as limiting the impact on neighbours, this also rebalances the economic equation in favour of longer-term residential lets. I'm advised that for you to be able to apply such a restriction in Norwich, the council would need to introduce an Article 4 direction, which would take more than 12 months to bring into force. And this would need to be preceded by a detailed analysis of the impact of short-term letting on the city's housing. A paper produced by your own planning department estimates that there could already be as many as 1,000 properties being used for short-term holiday lets in the city, which on my calculation is 1 in 64 of Norwich houses. I'd urge the committee not to grant any further permissions for short-term holiday letting until such an analysis has been complete and before the 1,000 figure rises exponentially. Thank you.
Have we got the applicants here? No, we've got Kate next, haven't we? Kate, thank you. You have 3 minutes as well, Kate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't want to repeat the points that have been made by local residents, but wanted to highlight the condition of 3 days minimum stay certainly goes some way to addressing some of the concerns. However, I'd say it's still markedly different from having a relationship with a neighbour who lives there full time. I also wondered about the noise management plan. There's some mention of being able to contact somebody without delay. So if you have, noisy neighbour on the first night, who do we contact? Is that contact with the council? I did have a look for the noise management plan, but I couldn't find that online. So some clarity on that would be really helpful. Or is that to do with the property manager or owner? I also wondered what kind of sanctions or steps can be put into place, in the event of a problem, because having a plan to identify issues is one thing, but what actions will be taken? I'm concerned as well about, we might not have quantifiable evidence of an issue, but I think anecdotally we know that there's some issues there. For example, the highways officer doesn't object on highway grounds. However, I'd note that we don't record near misses, and I'm particularly concerned at the narrow opening. If you know Newmarket Road, you know how very busy it gets. You know how cars back up from Town Close School. I mean, obviously that's not the fault of the owner, but nonetheless, if people come to harm, then I think we all are responsible. Also concerned about the road because it is unadopted, because it is a private road. We can't take the same actions that we would if it was council land, and that might be part of the course if you live on a private road. However, we're making a decision at City Council committee, and it seems inevitable to me that there will be extra cars, there will be extra impact on the road. It's said that that's a civil matter, but this is an action that we can mitigate against, I believe, today. I'm also concerned about access for emergency vehicles too. So the other thing with regard to the principle of development, this overarching detail, the net improvement in the standard of housing through upgrading, replacement, reconfiguration or re-provision of existing dwellings is the criteria under which that's given weight in favour of the application. However, I would say that's only applicable if that upgrade, if the renovations were yet to be undertaken. We're looking at the application as it is now. Upgrades have already been done. Anybody who was moving into a house that was going to be living there, not as an Airbnb, not as a short-term let, whether an owner occupier or a long-term tenant, those works would still be required and still be undertaken. And there's no guarantee. We're not asking to approve for a certain length of time. We're asking to approve for change of use. There's no guarantee that at any point in that house's future it will come back into being C3 usage. We don't know that, so we can't make a decision based on that. That's me. Thank you.
Okay, Kate, thank you. Have we got any body from the other side? No? We have. Did you wish to speak? And who are you, can I ask? Okay, did we know that? Yeah? Yeah, for your load 3 minutes as well, thank you. It's a little red button to push. Should turn green.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Dear Chair and members of the Planning Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak before the committee. I'm Graham Robinson-Hodges, a planning consultant appointed by the applicant. We would like to thank officers for their report to the committee, which sets out the relevant issues. The applicant has worked closely with officers to ensure that the proposals address any concern raised during the course of the planning application. The applicant has provided a dedicated noise management plan to be enforced through the lifetime of the site's use as a holiday let. This will ensure that additional safeguards are in place for neighbouring residents. There are also a number of conditions attached to the officer's reports, including conditions to restrict the use to a minimum of 3 nights, 3 night stays. The use of the rear garden, the requirement that only one vehicle may park at the property, and restrictions of use of routes of access to the property and levels of acceptable noise are all within the noise management plan. The plan also details course of action and records to be kept in the event of any breaches of the conditions, with dedicated phone numbers provided to all surrounded residents. There is also no objection from the highways officer in regard to transport matters. The applicant is undertaking significant renovations to improve the standard of housing, with the applicant being careful not to limit the site's potential to revert back to a residential dwelling in the future. In this way, the proposals would comply with policy DM15, in particular Lim D. Overall, the proposals are located in a highly sustainable location and provide significant benefits, increasing economic activity in the surrounding area and improving the standard of housing. The applicant has been pragmatic regarding the proposals and made significant changes to satisfy the comments received from neighbouring residents. We therefore respectfully request that the committee resolves to approve the application in line with the recommendation of your officers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now move on to questions, unless you need to come back on anything that was said.
I'll just provide clarification on the noise management plan. So in terms of the contactable person, that would be able to be reachable by the residents. That would be the applicant / property manager. So they will contact the property manager, and the property manager would then take action to address the issue that has been raised.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Colbert.
I've read the report and sorry, this microphone. Clearly the key aspect here to my thinking. So as I understand it, just correct me if I'm wrong, the amount of housing in the city decreases by 1 unit in this process. And the policy says the amount of housing or quality of housing must be increased. And there are various exceptional benefits. Can you just outline what's exceptional and beneficial about a holiday let compared to a loss of housing, please?
So one of the benefits would obviously be there will be some economic benefit to the local businesses with having people coming in, going into town, spending money, helping the local economy and the local businesses, which would be an economic benefit to the city. And also there is the benefit in that the property has had amount of works done to make it a better house than what it was before. So
sorry, the key point there is correct me if I'm wrong, is it making it a better house and housing, or is it making it a better business? Because we're saying it's improving the housing, but it's no longer a house, as I understand it.
When it reverts back, when it goes into C3 use, it would be a house that's a much higher quality than what it is before. So that's overall a higher quality accommodation, which would be available on the market for people to rent. And
sorry, can I just come back on that? I think the key thing as far as DM15 is concerned is that I think that the policy was drafted is entirely applicable to this site. I think it was drafted in anticipation of proposals that would effectively make it very difficult for the premises to be actually reused as C3 housing. We've placed weight, you may choose to do differently, we've placed weight on the fact that essentially there's no physical alteration. You're not converting this to an office, so you're not kind of gutting out the services and things like that. This simply requires a change of use to put it back into productive use as a house. So in some respects, it's not lost to the potential housing stock, and that's the weight that we've applied in terms of DM15. There is some marginal economic benefit, but that's not the primary issue in this instance.
Yeah, so it's similar area here. So on that policy, obviously, looking at the DMCV requires the loss of housing is only permitted, and then we've got the reasons, and then what I understand was considered to have been met was that there was a net improvement in the standard of housing through upgrading, etc. but that's already been done. So are we saying that this was sort of bought and the improvements done and then the planning application put in and therefore it's counted? Because to my mind, it's not going to be improved. It's already been improved. Does that make sense? Sorry, that question.
Yes, that's correct. So the improvements have already been done. It's already been improved. So that's already taken place. So that was improved. So it could be repurposed for this new use. So the improvements are done. There isn't going to be any improvements at this point. They've already been done.
Yeah, to go to DM15 as well. I was actually going to say something similar to Councillor Kane. So the net improvement in the standard of housing through upgrading, blah, blah, blah. It says this is permitted where this happens. It has already been done. This could have been done for sale or rent. This doesn't have to be an Airbnb. You know, we don't have to lose a house here. So my question is, how does DM15D apply when, as Councillor Kane said, this has already been improved? This doesn't lead to a net improvement to the area. So I don't think that DM15D is actually relevant, because there are no further improvements to the area as a result of this turning into an Airbnb.
I take that point, but I think the main issue with DM15, excuse me, is that the property can, with no modification at all, go back to being a C3. Go back. I've said what I've said. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you to everyone for answering the questions and the officers for the report and applicant and residents for everything they said. Similar territory still, and similar to things I know Councillor Oliver said in her speech, and Councillor Davis and Kane and Calvert have picked up. But on page 30 and 31, again, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but you're recommending us to approve this, and part of the reasoning for recommending we approve it is based on this notion that the property is not permanently removed as housing. It can at some point be turned back into housing, which obviously I accept, but we obviously can't. You're recommending something based on something we don't know if it is going to happen or not. With the best, it's beyond our control to know. Market forces could dictate that the applicant could turn it back into a house, or they could not. So I'm just wondering, how strong a grounds is that to recommend for approval something that we can't really know.
Okay, Carly?
I've got a question on a slightly different theme. Is it possible to condition how and where this would be advertised? Is that something?
No.
No. Okay.
Full stop.
Fine.
I haven't got a question, but I have got a comment in a minute. If we move on, we'll move on to comments. The recommendation is to approve. I will move that. We got seconded. Thank you. And as soon as we get rid of that, it'll be better for me. Councillor Lubbock.
Yes, thank you. We have heard that we have a number of lets like this in the city already, and we have a number of student lets that are perhaps a bit longer than 3 days, but they might be of a year. I mean, I think we just have to accept that we have this sort of mixed dwellings amongst other. Yeah, it's a mixed dwelling that we have in our communities, and I think it's pretty hard to sort of find reasons to say no to this one. I mean, perhaps, well, my logic is that we do need places like this. Not everyone wants to stay in a hotel. yes, it does take a house out of use by for rent or to buy, but I think it is just part of our mixed use of houses. And I think if we're going to take exception to this, what about all the students that come into our community and use the houses that people could have families in? And that has been a big takeover in the area where I live in Eton. Big sale, big time. But we have chosen not to take an issue with that. We've decided not to go for an Article 4 some years ago because we thought it would be, well, I didn't, but others thought it would be anti-student. I mean, I think this is a bit anti-visitor to say no to this one. It is just a different use, and as long as it can be conditioned that 3 nights, that a management plan is there and a contact is there, and that they don't use the garden, and that it's 1 parking space. There's a fair number of conditions there which should make it work and be reasonable in the neighbourhood. We don't place those conditions on students that come to live in the vicinity, and I just think this is why take issue with this one when we've already got so many others? And if we are going to go down that track and say no, we should say it to all. We should start down the track of an Article 4 if that's the wish of this planning committee. But it isn't really. It's not my wish. I think we should accommodate visitors in whatever way is necessary. It isn't at a number that it is a problem. Just as at the moment we've decided that students taking over houses is not a problem. And until we have something in place to resist this, I think I would be prepared to go along with it.
Councillor Harbour.
Thank you, Chair. I feel somewhat conflicted about this one, because on the one hand, I do agree with Councillor Lubbock that actually our reasons for refusal are relatively limited. I'm not against Airbnbs being created, because I do think that there are very specific circumstances under which they can be really useful, particularly for I mean, I have a young family, and actually staying in an Airbnb is often far more far more suitable than a hotel for a variety of reasons. So I don't have that issue. I do have concerns though about the suitability of this particular property and location, and again I do share concerns about the kind of net loss of housing. I would feel much happier with applications of this type if we saw the management plan. The point that's been made earlier, I think I feel deeply uncomfortable with saying, well, with a management plan, and then sort of washing our hands of it. And I think the objections that we've heard, are quite valid. So at the moment, I feel really conflicted about this one, and I'm interested in hearing other colleagues' comments. But I do think that it would be a much more discussion if we were able to see a detailed management plan.
Councillor Young.
We hear every single day that we are short of homes in this country. It was on the radio again this morning. They were saying that we need to make sure that local planning committees do not get in the way of more homes. We need more homes. We hear that young people trying to rent a property, it's like applying for a job. My colleague's son, who just managed to rent somewhere this week, way out in Hingham, because that was the only affordable place he can get, he was competing with people who were offering 6 months rent in advance, a year's month's rent in advance. I'm just flabbergasted that we're going to take out what is a very desirable, lovely, ready, refurbished home for young professionals, for a family. And yes, we have too many student houses too. We heard from UEA that we have accommodation halls at UEA empty, you know, we absolutely do need to seriously look at housing in Norwich. Let's start right now and not have a lovely family home in a fabulous community that's supportive and looks after each other and make it into a holiday let. I just don't know why we're here even considering doing that.
Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Chair. Of course, first of all, I must say that it's not just that people from outside of Norwich are coming in and using houses in Norwich. I, in fact, rented an Airbnb 11 days ago in Great Yarmouth because it was for my son's wedding. I actually had to look after. There were also in there with me half a dozen young adults and teenagers. So a firm hand was required. And it's a lot easier if you've got a family, especially at that age, to do so in an Airbnb than it is in a hotel. But I do also accept that we do have a housing crisis. I don't think there's any question of that, although I suspect the answer to that is actually building new houses. But at the end of the day, so I am conflicted on this issue. I think at the end of the day, an Airbnb can work as long as it's properly managed. Certainly the one I stayed at had a whole series of rules, because at the end of the day, it's not in their interest to have rowdy groups, because at the end of the day, they'll cause damage to the property as much as upset the neighbours. So success of this kind of operation really always does depend upon the management of the building. I can see both points of view. I think I'm certainly at the moment I'd probably go for the recommendations, but with a heavy heart.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you very much, Chair. We've heard from other contributors that we don't have many grounds to reject this other than our development management policy, which is the entire grounds on which we make all our planning decisions. If we are to disregard our policies, then we get a planning Wild West where we're in here deciding every tiny application from base principles, and which is just completely unsustainable as a way of doing development. If we have a development policy, we should follow it unless we've got exceptional reasons not to. And as far as I can see, there are absolutely no exceptional reasons not to, and there's every reason to follow it. And there I rest my case.
Councillor Davis.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Calvert. We've seen the plan here. It says that there's 2 bedrooms, so there's 2 double beds in there. There's 2 sofas in there. Are they sofa beds? Is there a maximum limit? Could we have effectively 8 people staying in there? You know, we don't have any of these management plans in front of us. We don't actually know. There could be 8 people in there for 3 nights for, you know, however long. But you know, I don't agree that this does match our principles of development. So I'll be voting against this.
Councillor Cade.
Yeah, just to reiterate, essentially both what Councillor Calvert and Councillor Davis have said. Sorry, but I understand this is only one house, yeah, but there is evidence, as we heard from some of the residents, of the way Airbnbs are eroding communities, and that is why we have these strict rules. You know, this policy that states that this loss of housing is only permitted where it involves. And personally, I do not feel that requirement has been met strongly enough. It's already renovated, it's already a home, nothing's going to be done to it. And I don't think enough has been said to go against our own policy, which is meant to be a safeguarding for houses in Norwich.
David?
I'm going to give it a go. I hear what the committee is saying, but I kind of need to ask you to kind of be clear in your own mind whether or not your objection is to the loss of this property in principle for anything, or whether your objection is the loss of this property to an Airbnb. Because I think if it's the latter, then I think the issue is not just about DM15, because we've already heard about whether the number of people who could be accommodated, are there going to be sofa beds? Well, I mean, we don't know the answer to those questions about the number of people who actually might use the property. So when you're kind of thinking about your recommendation, or your decision rather, Can I just ask that you're clear in your own minds about whether it's the loss of the property in principle, or whether it's the impact of an Airbnb, because they're two different things. And I think there's two reasons for refusal. There's a principal issue, which some of you have articulated. My advice to you is that there isn't the hard and fast evidence that the issue of loss of this type of property would have a material impact upon the supply of housing in Norwich. That's my advice. You can do with that what you want. If your issue is about the impact of Airbnbs per se, I think that's what you should be focusing on. And I just leave those two thoughts with you.
Councillor Sands, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. I believe there are a number of issues here. First of all, I can see that this as a Airbnb has no exceptional benefits. I can see that it has no overriding gain to the community at all. A tenant in a property brings income and spending power, just as a short-term let does. And they bring longer-term benefits, because a tenant, what we're talking about here is a group of houses which have gardens which have a communal access. Now, short-term tenants are not likely to be on nodding acquaintance or even know the names of the people living there. What we're talking about is a loss of community. A longer-term tenant is going to get to know their neighbours. If they see, oh, so-and-so hasn't taken their milk in, or so-and-so haven't seen them outside anymore, they're going to show concern for their neighbours. And this, I think, is one of the key aspects. It's a loss of privacy with essentially strangers coming and going, a loss of local amenity, and a loss of local community. And all of those things, I think we should be looking at building community, not taking away from community. If this was, say, a block of flats and it was just where you access a common stairwell where you never see neighbours possibly, it was a little ground floor flat, might be a different question. But what we're talking about is a group of houses where you've got a group of neighbours who have a community aspect. So for these reasons, I cannot even remotely envision. I was open-minded on this before. I had no prior thoughts at all until I heard people speak, and I looked a little bit more closely at DM15 and a couple of other things, but I cannot envision being able to approve this application.
Well, I said no. Someone need to propose it. Yeah.
Before you do, can I just comment on what Councillor Sands has said? There's two issues in there. There's the principle of the loss of the dwelling, and then there's the impact of the Airbnb upon the community. And they're two different things. So if
we've had discussions in the past on previous applicants going back over the years, the loss of amenity and loss of privacy has been one of the things that we have highlighted in turning down applications. And I think those are two very, very strong grounds, and loss of community as well.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that, but I'm saying that there's two issues. There's a principal issue about DM15, and then there's the impact of the specific proposed use. If you're going to refuse this application, I strongly advise you can do it on both, but don't just do it on one.
Okay, it's been proposed that we do it on both anyway, I believe.
Sorry, just to clarify, did you say?
We have to do it on both, not just one. Well, we don't have to, but you might lose it if you only did it on one.
I had completely misunderstood. So it would be legally safer to reject it on both grounds.
Yes.
And be clear about that.
Because the reasons that you're articulating to me are linked, but they are also distinct. A lot of the issues that you've been talking about in this debate are about the impact of Airbnb. You've focused on DM, or some of you have focused on DM15 as a point of principle, which is fine, but most of the debate has been about the impact of Airbnb. So there's two issues.
Oh,
do it on both if you want to. If you think that there is material harm to justify both issues, loss of the property to their as a house, but also think about the impact of the proposed use, which is what most of you have actually been talking about.
Okay, so I propose to turn down the application on 2 grounds.
Yes.
To be really clear, one is that it doesn't adhere to DM15 and it loses housing.
Yep.
Which is a policy objection. And then additionally to that, there's a further objection as to loss of amenity to the neighbours by virtue of the use of the site.
Yep.
Is that nice and clear?
And the second for that?
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Everyone, I think. Well, nearly everyone. But okay, if any discussion on this? Now, all those in favour, please show. Of the recommendation which has been done, which was turned down the applicant. Okay. All those in favour, please show. Now, Kane. Yep. All those against, please show. Thank you. That's the full complement. Okay, the application has been turned down. Thank you for coming. That's the end of the planning meeting, and have a nice Christmas and a happy New Year. We'll see you in January. Thank you.